welcome to polymers. We could really do multiple days and an entire course on polymers. So I'm going to focus on some of the important things to understand about them as a general category of compounds. I'm going to show you some other things that are of interest that you don't necessarily need to take notes on, but they really do kind of add to your understanding of overall what a polymer is, how useful they can be, how they're important, and how they're a great example of human beings copying nature. Polymers are large molecules of repeating units that are covalently bonded together. Most of these are going to be carbon-based, so you're going to see a lot of carbon-carbon bonds in them. They're made up of individual units called monomers. So we have these little puzzle pieces called monomers, meaning one piece, and we stick those monomers together into a polymer, which means many pieces. Because these molecules are made up of many units that are stuck, and by that I mean chemically bonded together, they have very high molecular masses, very high gram formula masses. A polymer can contain between 500 and 20,000 monomers. If you imagine a simple monomer like ethene, for example, which has 2 carbons and 4 hydrogens. 2 carbons and 4 hydrogens gives you a gram formula mass of about 28. Imagine stringing 20,000 of those together. They're one molecule now. Imagine calculating that number of grams per mole. Polymers were not a human invention. They were invented in nature. Some of them are for storage. 2 examples of this, and again, you don't need to take notes on this. This is, I think, very interesting, but starch you've heard of as being a plant product. This is how plants actually store the sugar that they make by photosynthesis. When we eat plants, this is a large part of the energy that we get from plants. We can break down starch molecules to use them as an energy source. Glycogen is actually made by humans. It's also got the same monomer of glucose. Animals use this to store extra glucose for later use. It's made mostly in the liver and muscles. So if you imagine you're exercising really hard and you need a little bit more glucose, you've been running for a really long time. These are glucose stores that your muscles can actually access. Your liver can break them down as well if it's been a long time since you've had a meal. Again, these are strung together after a meal. Later, when you need energy, your body can break them down. Some other natural polymers, in this case, it's actually our same monomer of glucose again. This is the primary structural polymer in cell walls. It's called cellulose and gives plant cells rigidity. We actually can't break this bond down. You're going to notice this attachment right here has a little bit of a different configuration than this attachment right here. It may seem pretty simple, but we have an enzyme to break down this particular type of linkage, I believe called alpha linkage, whereas this type of sugar-sugar linkage, that different conformation, we do not have the enzyme to break it down. Termites, carpenter ants, however, do, so they can actually eat cellulose or wood for energy. Chitin is pretty similar. It's a glucose with a nitrogen added. You may probably learned about this in bio, being in the exoskeletons of crustaceans. Fungi can also have it in their cell walls. Chitin goes crunch, as we like to say. This is a very protective and structural molecule. It can be used also in food manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. I'm about to ruin Skittles for you. I'm telling you about shellac. This is made by a bug, and it's actually in that bug's cocoon. You can see that this has kind of a crazy structure to it, but it is a polymer. It's used to coat things such as wood and, yes, Skittles. So a little internet research will probably completely ruin Skittles for you. Some other interesting notes on glucose polymers. Photosynthesis makes sugar. Plants store it as cellulose, as we mentioned before, and as starch. So the cellulose is actually their structural polymer that allows them to stand up, and starch is actually them just needing to store some of those molecules. Again, those bonds are circled to show you those different types of linkages. We can break this down. We can break down the one on the left, this alpha linkage, or I'm sorry, we can break down the one on the right, this alpha linkage right here, whereas we cannot break down, I believe that's called a beta linkage. Polymers can have a million other jobs too. Proteins are made up of amino acids. You learned about them back in bio. They have a lot of jobs, acting as enzymes to help us digest, hormones like insulin. They're also important structurally in our body, and they can be used as energy via protein. That can be a food source. DNA is an information storage polymer made up of nucleotides. These store genetic information and allow us to pass that genetic information on to our offspring. Humans are great at copying nature. I think it's kind of important to remember that that's where we get a lot of our best ideas. George de Mestral went for a walk one day, got a bunch of burdock stuck all over him, and he turned around and said, "You know what? This sucks, but I'm going to make lemonade. I'm going to invent some Velcro." He saw the little hook structure on the burrs and, essentially put that on one side of the Velcro and then made the other side very curly so that the hooks had something to grab onto. Humans have used natural polymers for years. Silk is a polymer made by worms. Cotton is a polymer made of cellulose. Sap actually has natural rubber in it, which gave us the idea for man-made rubber. And these allowed people to see that polymers are durable and versatile and can be altered to have certain properties. So this is probably one of the most important things to get out of these last few slides, is that polymers are a very versatile type of material that can be used for many, many, many different jobs. And again, here are just some more examples of some useful polymers. In addition, polymerization reaction is an important thing to be able to recognize. You don't need to write this out, but in addition, polymerization works like an addition reaction. You're going to notice this little N right here. That means pretty much any number, usually a pretty large number. It could be 500, it could be 20,000. You'll notice that just like in our other addition reaction, we have that bond opening up, which allows a growing polymer chain to form. So this is made up of two ethene molecules. If we continue to add more and more on here, this N right here refers to the number of monomers we actually put in. This particular molecule, starting with ethene, which used to be called ethylene, makes polyethylene or polyethylene, which is a very, very common polymer. It's extremely significant in our day-to-day life, really ushered us into the age of plastics. This was first made actually by accident, and current annual production is about 80 million metric tons. It is used in shopping bags, milk cartons, hoses, tubing, food packaging, detergent bottles, shrink wrap, portable water, pumping equipment, machine parts, artificial joints, and more. So this is really kind of all over the place. You can imagine it has a huge gram formula mass because we have so many of these little molecules stuck together. What's especially cool about this molecule, and you don't need to write these out, but I do want you to see from this that we're able to alter these molecules by simply putting a chlorine right here, so that every other carbon has a chlorine on it. This actually makes a much harder plastic that we know as polyvinyl chloride, or PVC. You're going to find that in your home in drain pipes. You're going to find it in wire insulators. It's also even really in clothing, so this is a pretty important polymer. Acrylonitrile is a harder. We actually add this group right here, and by adding this group right here, we get something called polyacrylonitrile, which is in outdoor awnings, tennis rackets, some of your harder plastics that you might buy. It's a cyanide ion, sorry, blanked on its name. Benzene we talked briefly about before, this big bulky ring with this electron resonance. What's cool is if you put a benzene ring onto this molecule, benzene actually has like all these mobile electrons. It's a big bulky ring structure. So if you imagine a ton of these kind of next to each other in this molecule, you get a very good insulator. You get this kind of cushy foam type material that we know as polystyrene or styrofoam. So looking at that molecule, you can really see how those big bulky rings are going to contribute to the ability of this compound to be cushy or to be an insulator. Benzene, again, as we mentioned before, has potential cancer-causing implications. So it's not something that we like to necessarily use a lot of. What is important in your notes, that you identify the two types. So we just talked about addition polymerization and a few examples of their products. So polyethylene we talked about, polystyrene, PVC. just understanding that, simple little alterations give you a completely different product, well, somewhat different product that has some different properties. So polyvinyl chloride is in some of these places, siding on houses, wire insulation, your raincoat. Polypropylene is in things like tents and clothing. Polystyrene is in a lot of different places, a lot of consumer goods that you would find in your home. Condensation polymerization looks very much like an esterification reaction. You're going to see this little situation right here, which is something that you have noted before as condensation synthesis. So this is a condensation polymerization because one of the products of this is water. One of the most common things that we make out of this is something called PET, or polyethylene terephthalate. If we just go to this website for a quick second, oops, sorry, let me bring it up here. This website gives a nice little visual. What is happening here? Okay, maybe that's not going to work. But if you want to actually type that website in, they give a nice visual of the water molecules coming off of during this particular type of synthesis. So again, this is an esterification reaction, essentially. We have a Ku group. We have a booze group. So that's an important thing to just kind of be able to notice, is that there are a lot of applications to these reactions. These can actually have aluminum added to them to make shiny, if you're seeing that kind of plastic insulation that has a metallic appearance to it. This is also used in soda bottles. 2 million kilograms of PET is made in the USA every single year, so it's quite a large amount. And this corresponds to that recycling number 1 that you see really all over the place. So again, just write this down as one of your examples. What's important to understand overall is that there are many different types of polymers. They occur in nature. They can also be man-made. There are 2 major types of reactions that we use to make them: addition polymerization and condensation polymerization. These molecules are able to do a lot of different things because they're made up of a lot of different building blocks, which also gives them very large molecular masses.